Let me tell you a little something. People say I'm just the lunch lady. They say it when they think I'm not listening, like I'm part of the wallpaper. Like the hairnet on my head cancels out the mind in it. I hear everything. I see everything. 12 years I've been serving trays and stirring gravy in this school cafeteria. That's over 4,000 school days, if anyone's counting. And trust me, I've counted. You'd be amazed what folks will say when they think you're just there to refill their chocolate milk. They laughed at me, called me names, made jokes behind my back and sometimes right to my face, about my weight, my skin, my job. Thought I didn't have the brain God gave a goose just because I served chicken nuggets and mashed potatoes. But I wasn't always the lunch lady. And even now, especially now, I am not who they think I am. So when things started going wrong in this school, when laptops went missing and students got blamed and everything started turning ugly, guess who figured out what was really going on? Me. Ms. Kate John. The woman in the back with the ladle and the long memory. The same woman they laughed at. And honey, when I finally opened my mouth, they froze. Make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because you don't want to mix what happens next. Trust me, this gets incredible. Let me paint the picture for you. Tuesday morning, 6:45 a.m., and I'm already elbow deep in a pot of country gravy. The kitchen's hot, the vents rattle when the wind kicks up, and the only music playing is me humming a little Mahalia Jackson to myself. That's how I like it, a little gospel, a little steam, and a whole lot of peace before the chaos begins. By 7:30, the students start trickling in. The first few always shuffle in like zombies, still half asleep with their headphones on and backpacks dragging the floor. Some nod politely, some grunt, and some, well, they don't see me at all. I'm just the lady behind the counter to them. No more human than the vending machine. But I see them. And I remember things. Who always forgets their lunch card. Who eats slow like they're saving the taste. Who never has lunch money but always says I'm not hungry. That one breaks my heart every time. This particular Tuesday, I noticed something strange right away. 3 boys, year 10, came in too loud, too early, and too confident. One of them, Jamal, liked to call himself King J when nobody asked him to. He's got a loud mouth and a pocket full of other people's pens. They made a scene like always, laughing too hard at things that weren't funny. "Yo, Ms. Loretta," Jamal called out, already grinning. "How much seasoning you put in that gravy today? Or you just wave the salt shaker at it like usual?" The boys laughed. I smiled. "I season it just fine, sugar. That's why you always come back for seconds." That shut him up for a second. But then his friend, the one with the slick eyebrows and no manners, muttered something like, "She probably been cooking since slavery days. That's why she don't need recipes." More laughter. I didn't respond. Not with words. Just kept stirring. But I saw something while they laughed, the quiet boy behind them. Nervous. Shoulders hunched. Shoes too big for his feet, like he borrowed them from someone older. He looked scared. That was the first red flag. What came next? Well, that's where things started unraveling. A teacher's laptop went missing that afternoon. Accusations flew. And guess who got blamed? The quiet boy. Malik. The one with the 2 big shoes. Only I knew the truth. Because I'd seen what no one else did. And this time, I wasn't going to be silent. Now let me tell you something about people who don't think you're paying attention. They get sloppy. The minute you blend into the background, they stop pretending. That's how you learn the real version of them. That day, after the lunch rush, I stayed behind to wipe down the serving line. I like to take my time with that part. Makes me feel like I'm cleaning more than just counters. Feels like I'm scrubbing the day off my spirit. I was rinsing out the mop bucket when I heard the news. Malik's been suspended. The words came from one of the Year 11 girls, Tanisha, whispering loud to her friend by the vending machine. For what? They said he stole Mr. Bennett's laptop. No way. Malik don't even talk in class. Exactly. I set the mop down gently. My hands were suddenly too tight around the handle. Malik. The quiet boy with the oversized shoes. Now, I may just be the lunch lady, but I know a setup when I smell one. See, that morning, right before first bell, I saw something nobody else did. Jamal, loud as ever, brushing past Mr. Bennett's room when the halls were almost empty. His backpack looked a little too full for someone who never brought a book to school. And right after lunch, I saw him again. Empty-handed. Smiling to himself. I ain't saying that proves anything. But where I come from, we don't need to catch the thief with their hand in the purse. Sometimes, watching how they walk away is all the truth you need. That afternoon, I went about my duties like always. I smiled at the teachers in the staff lounge. Handed out fruit cups to the after-school program. But all the while, I was watching, listening, and asking quiet questions. First, I cleaned the lost and found closet. You'd be surprised how many secrets end up buried under gym clothes and abandoned notebooks. I found a student ID tucked between two binders, Malik's, but it was scratched and bent, like someone had been twisting it. Next, I stopped by the janitor's closet under the pretense of needing gloves. "Hey, Jameson," I said, "you didn't happen to see anybody hang around Mr. Bennett's room this morning?" He blinked at me. "Not really. Wait, actually, yeah. Jamal and his crew were messing around near the lockers. I told them to get lost. Figured they were skipping homeroom." I nodded like it didn't mean anything. But it meant everything. See, I wasn't going to run to the principal just yet. I've seen how that plays out. They don't listen to lunch ladies, not unless a food fight breaks out. No, baby. I had to be sure. So I waited. Watched. And what do you know? That same Jamal came back the next morning, a little more jittery than usual. Tried to walk past me like I was invisible. But I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Morning, Jamal. You sleep good." He blinked. "Huh. Yeah. Why?" I smiled. Just wondering. Funny how guilt'll keep some people up at night. His face changed. A flicker of something, not fear. Recognition. I knew then. He knew I knew. And I wasn't gonna let this slide. They laughed at the lunch lady. But now, I had a trail. And Lord help them, because I wasn't going to stop until the truth came out. You ever try digging in a flower bed full of weeds? That's what it felt like, trying to pull the truth out of this school without making too big a mess. But sometimes, baby, mess is exactly what you need to make. See, truth doesn't live in the front office or the polished teacher's lounge. It lives in dusty corners, between the pages of old notebooks, in the words kids whisper when they think grown folks ain't listening. And I knew just where to start. First stop, the IT room. I didn't barge in like I had a badge. No, I brought Mr. Doyle, the school's tech supervisor, a plate of cornbread and a big grin. "Made it this morning," I said sweetly. "Just felt like somebody in here deserved something warm." His eyes lit up like Christmas. "Loretta, you're gonna get me in trouble with my wife." I laughed and leaned just a little closer. "Speaking of trouble, heard about the laptop that went missing. You ever find it?" He blinked. "Nope. Still off-grid. Whoever took it either wiped it or turned it off right away." I nodded. "And nobody checked the login history." "Only admins can see that. But between you and me," he leaned in, "someone did try to access the school network around 7:52 that morning. From a personal hotspot." "Did they find out who?" He hesitated. "Not officially. But I saw a login attempt under Malik's student ID." I bit the inside of my cheek. That was what they were using to bury him. But I already knew someone else had that ID. I found it bent and nearly broken in the supply closet. Somebody used Malik's info to cover their tracks. And I had a pretty good idea who. Next stop. Janitor Jameson. He didn't know it, but he was my best source. Quiet kids and rowdy ones always forget he's there when he's sweeping. And unlike me, he hasn't trained his face to smile through everything. You see Jamal near Mr. Bennett's class again? I asked him on Wednesday, while we were both wiping down tables. He nodded. Actually, yeah. 2 days ago. He snuck something into locker 210. Thought I didn't see. Did he put it in the locker? Jameson wiped his hands on his pants. No. He lifted the ceiling tile above it. Bingo. Don't suppose you got a key to those lockers, do you? He looked at me, eyes wide. You about to do something you shouldn't, Ms. Loretta? I smiled. Honey, if I don't, nobody else will. That afternoon, I waited. Waited for the last bell to ring, the hallways to clear, the teachers to disappear into their inboxes and busy work. Then I marched my behind right down to locker 210 with a step stool, a pair of gloves, and Jameson looking out like a nervous squirrel. Pulled the ceiling tile back, and there it was. A slim black laptop, Mr. Bennett's. Still dusty. Still warm. Still full of proof. I didn't touch it. Just took a picture with the phone I kept tucked in my apron. One picture of the laptop. One of the tile. One of the locker number. Then I called Principal Vaughan. Now, I'd had my run-ins with Principal Vaughan before. Polite man, but like most people in charge, he had a hard time believing wisdom came with an apron. He showed up 10 minutes later. What's this? He asked. This, I said calmly, is where you'll find what you've been looking for. And this, I held up the pictures on my phone, is proof that you nearly ruined the life of a child because you listened to the loudest voices instead of the right ones. His face turned the color of chalk. Ms. Loretta, You don't have to say it to me, I interrupted. You owe Malik an apology. Publicly. He nodded. And he did. The next morning, Malik was reinstated. His name cleared. His suspension erased. The school held a rushed assembly to celebrate accountability and community justice, whatever that meant. As for Jamal, he was dealt with behind closed doors, no fanfare, no grand speeches. But he never looked at me the same again. None of them did. Because now, they knew. They laughed at me. They called me slow, called me ancient, called me just the lunch lady. But when it mattered most, I was the only one in that building who saw the truth. And I didn't just serve them food. I served them justice. Now, you'd think once I cleared that boy's name, that'd be the end of it. I thought so too. But sometimes, when you clean up one mess, you uncover another underneath it. The day after Malik came back to school, I noticed he didn't look relieved. He looked tired. Not the kind of tired you fix with sleep, the kind that lives in your bones. The kind that makes a 14-year-old boy walk like he's 70. He came through the lunch line holding his tray like it weighed 10 pounds. Mac and cheese okay today? I asked gently, sliding a scoop onto his plate. He looked up at me with those big, heavy eyes. Thank you, Ms. Loretta. Don't thank me, I said. You just keep standing up straight. He nodded, but he didn't smile. That afternoon, I passed by his locker on my way to the kitchen. It was open, and he was gone. I don't normally snoop. Lord knows I've seen enough in this school to mind my business, but something told me to pause. Inside, wedged between a wrinkled math book and a cracked water bottle, was a folded-up envelope. It was creased and soft, like it had been opened 100 times. I didn't touch it. Just leaned in enough to read the words written across the front. To someone who cares. Phew. That hit me hard. I left it right there, but my heart ached the rest of the day. Later, I found Malik sitting on the back steps behind the cafeteria. It was quiet out there, the air thick with the scent of fried oil and wildflowers from the school garden. He was staring at the ground, holding the letter in his hands. You ever write something, he said without looking up, and hope nobody ever finds it, but also hope someone does. I sat beside him, letting my knees creak loud as they pleased. All the time, baby. That's why I keep a whole drawer full of journals in my nightstand. He finally smiled. Just a flicker, but it warmed me. I wasn't gonna do anything bad, he said, rubbing the letter's edge. I just didn't think anyone saw me. Not really. I nodded. I know that feeling. He handed me the letter without a word. I didn't open it then. Just held it gently. You sure? I asked. He shrugged. You're the only one who noticed. That night, I read it. And Lord, that letter broke me wide open. He wrote about his mom working 2 jobs and barely making rent. About being hungry some days and ashamed to say it. About trying to act tough so people wouldn't mess with him. About feeling like school wasn't made for boys like him. Quiet, brown-skinned, smart but invisible. But what hit me most was the last line. I just want someone to believe me before they blame me. I folded the letter, pressed it to my chest, and let myself cry. Not just for Malik. For all the kids like him. For the years I walked these halls unnoticed. For every moment I bit my tongue just to keep a job. But not anymore. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Principal Vaughan. I brought the letter. I brought my full voice. I told him this school needed more than discipline and security cameras. It needed eyes that saw. It needed teachers trained to recognize more than just trouble. It needed a support system that didn't rely on kids breaking before they were helped. And I told him, plain as day, that if he didn't start listening to the right people, this school was gonna break more kids than it saved. He sat there, stunned. Not defensive. Not angry. Just quiet. He asked if I'd be willing to help develop a student mentorship program. I said, only if you're willing to stop looking past the people who already know how to lead. They laughed at me. Until I taught them how to listen. When you've been invisible long enough, baby, you learn to recognize other ghosts. That's why I saw 'em, the quiet ones. The hungry ones. The ones always late, always tired, always carrying more than they should for kids their age. And once I opened my mouth, once I stepped out from behind the lunch counter, they started seeing me, too. The school board didn't move quick, but Principal Vaughan kept his word. He gave me a corner of the old library annex, the part nobody used since the computers broke, and let me turn it into something new. I called it the Mentors Club. No sign, no dress code, no speeches. Just a quiet room with mismatched chairs, a few borrowed rugs, and a shelf full of second-hand books I'd collected from thrift stores and old co-workers. I brought in people the kids knew, Jameson the janitor, Miss Carla from the front office, and even Ms. Jennings, the retired art teacher with the limp and the paint stains still on her fingers. They weren't polished, but they were real. And the students came. Not all at once. But they came. Malik was the first to walk through the door that first Tuesday after school. He didn't say much. Just sat and listened. But a week later, he brought a girl named Amira. Then a boy named Justin. Then 2 more who hadn't spoken a word in class all year. We didn't teach curriculum in that room. We taught truth. How to write a resume if your folks didn't know how. How to speak up in a world built to quiet you. How to forgive yourself when nobody ever taught you grace. And sometimes, we didn't teach at all. We just listened. One day, Malik stood up during a group session and said something I'll never forget. He said, I used to think this school was a place I had to survive. But now I think it might be a place I can grow. Child, I nearly broke in half. Not because he said it, but because he believed it. Soon, word started spreading. Students from other grades started peeking in. Teachers began asking how to get involved. Even Vaughan started stopping by, just to sit in the back and listen. It wasn't perfect. We had pushback. Some staff still thought it was just a lunch lady running her mouth. But I wasn't afraid of mouths anymore. I knew the work was holy. Because every time a child sat down in that room, something sacred happened. Not because I was anything special, but because someone finally made space for them to breathe. One Thursday afternoon, After the last bell rang and the halls emptied, Malik helped me stack chairs. He looked at me, soft around the edges now, and asked, "Why'd you do it, Ms. Loretta? Why not just let it go after they blamed me?" I looked at him, dead in the eyes. "Because I remember what it's like to be you, baby. And no one came for me. So I came for you." He nodded, fighting that smile again. "You think people like us really change things?" I picked up my bag and locked the door behind us. "We already did. Now let me tell you something I know for sure. Change don't knock on the front door wearing a suit. It sneaks in through the side, in stories, in whispers, in the way people start to look at each other differently." That's what was happening at Mayfair Secondary. Kids were sitting up straighter. Teachers were listening more. Fewer fights in the hallways. More kids eating all their lunch, staying after school, asking questions they never used to ask. Even the loud ones started softening. But the biggest change came the day I saw heels clicking down the hallway. Polished, expensive heels. Worn by none other than Superintendent Dolores Keene. Tall, sharp, and always surrounded by people who talk like they invented education. She walked in on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, of course, right in the middle of Mentors Club. We had 15 kids that day, sitting in a circle. Malik was reading a poem he wrote about his mama, raw, rhythmic, and real. Jameson was nodding along, and Carla was passing out graham crackers. The superintendent paused at the doorway, lips pursed, eyebrows raised. "This is unconventional," she said. I looked up from my folding chair, smiled, and said, "So is poverty. So is trauma. So is being 13 and already feeling like a failure. We meet students where they are." She blinked. Twice. Then she sat down. She stayed the whole session. Didn't take notes. Didn't interrupt. Just watched. And when Malik finished reading his poem, you could have heard a pin drop. He looked her right in the face and said, "We don't need saving. We need someone to believe us before they blame us." That boy's voice echoed off the windows. Ms. Keene looked, changed. Just for a second. She cleared her throat. "Ms. James," she said, looking at me, "you've created something very unexpected here." "Yes, I said. Unexpected, but necessary." She gave me a long look. "We'd like to invite you to speak at the upcoming district conference. Share this approach." I didn't flinch. Didn't smile too big, either. I just said, "I'll come. But only if you let Malik and these kids come too. Their voices matter more than mine." She nodded, slow. Then stood, shook my hand, and left, heels clicking like thunder. 2 weeks later, I stood behind a podium made of glass and wood, staring out at a sea of school leaders in starched collars. But I didn't stand there alone. Malik stood beside me. And Amira. And Justin. And 2 more students who had found their voices in the room the world forgot. I told those principals and board members the truth. You can't fix what you don't see. And you can't see kids if you think feeding them is beneath you. I told them about watching patterns. About listening deeper than words. About the power of showing up every single day with a soft heart and an open ear. And then I let the students speak. Their words were stronger than mine. More painful. More beautiful. And when we finished, the entire room stood up. Not for me. For them. Afterward, the superintendent shook my hand again. "You've reminded us what school is supposed to be." I told her, school should be the one place where kids don't have to prove they matter. They laughed at me. Until the very system that ignored me asked me to teach it how to do better. Not bad for a woman with a hairnet and a ladle, huh? I knew it was coming. You can't pour this much light into a dark place without somebody bringing a camera. The superintendent tried to warn me. She called late one evening, voice crisp as ever. "A local station got wind of your program. They'd like to feature you. Feel-good piece. Spotlight on equity in education." I sighed into the phone. If it's about the kids, fine. If it's about turning my story into a headline, I'm not interested. She paused. They said they want the human angle. There it was. The lunch lady makes good story. The kind they love to tell just enough to feel inspired, but never enough to get uncomfortable. Still, I agreed. For the kids. I wanted the world to see them, hear them, maybe even learn from them. But I braced myself. Because media attention don't come without cost, especially not for folks who look like me. The news crew arrived the following week, shiny lights and fake smiles in tow. The reporter, a young blonde woman named Stephanie, shook my hand like she was surprised I didn't drop it. "We're so excited," she said. "This is such a heartwarming story, a cafeteria worker changing lives." I gave her a polite nod. "We're more than cafeteria workers, sugar." And the lives were already full of power, we just helped them find their voice. She blinked, and then smiled tighter. They filmed me scooping mac and cheese, standing at the Mentors Club whiteboard, hugging Malik. They asked the kids what I meant to them, and bless them, those babies spoke from the soul. She listens. She sees us. She made me believe I wasn't stupid. She told me I'm allowed to dream. By the time they wrapped, Stephanie was blinking back tears. I thought maybe, just maybe, they'd get it right. The segment aired 2 nights later. The title: Lunch Lady with a Big Heart Changes Troubled Teens' Lives. Troubled teens. Big heart. Not a word about the system that ignored them. Not a word about the racism, the hunger, the broken funding. Not a word about how close Malik came to being expelled for something he didn't do. They turned our fight into a fairy tale. The kids were excited, at first. They laughed seeing themselves on TV. Took screenshots. Shared clips. But by the next week, things changed. Strangers started showing up. A podcast host. 2 white education influencers with ring lights. A non-profit offering to buy the Mentors Club curriculum. I said no to most of it. Because it wasn't about us. It was about their brand. Even worse, Malik started getting messages online. Some encouraging. Some cruel. "They're only helping you because you're black. Bet that lunch lady's just doing this for attention. You'll still end up like the rest." It hurt him. But it infuriated me. That Friday, I closed the club early. I gathered all the students in a circle and told them the truth. They'll try to turn this into something sweet and safe. Something easy to digest. But y'all are not sugar-coated stories. You're real. You're rising. And if anyone ever tries to make you feel small so they can feel big, you send them to me. They laughed, but I meant it. Because protecting their peace, their growth, was more important than any spotlight. They laughed at me. Then they filmed me. Then they tried to package me. But I didn't build this for cameras. I built it for the kids. And I'd burn every press pass in this town before I let anyone take that away from them. The letter came in a thick envelope with gold trim. At first, I thought it was another fundraiser or a fancy coupon. I nearly tossed it in the bin next to the broken laminator and a half-eaten pack of saltines. But then I saw the heading. National Alliance for Education Equity. Congratulations, Ms. Kate John. You've been selected as a finalist for the Hero in Education Award. I sat down, hard. The kind of sit where your knees give out, but your soul stays standing. The staff heard about it before the day was over. The teachers were full of congratulations. Jameson nearly cried. Even Principal Vaughan called me into his office and said, "You deserve this more than anyone I've ever met." But the truth, I didn't feel deserving. I felt conflicted. Because where was this energy back when they wouldn't let me speak at staff meetings? Where were these claps and emails when I was scrubbing trays with arthritis, or bringing extra peanut butter sandwiches because I knew certain kids wouldn't eat at home? And what about Malik? What about Amira, who's applying to colleges nobody in her family's ever heard of? Or Justin, Who's learning how to speak without stuttering for the first time. They're the ones who built this thing with me. And now, my name was the one shining on that letter, like I did it all by myself. That night, I sat with the award invitation in one hand and Malik's poem in the other. I didn't sleep. At 5:17 a.m., I wrote a letter back. To the Hero in Education Committee. I am honored to be considered. Truly. But if I'm going to accept this award, I will only do so under one condition. That 5 of my students, young people who turned pain into power, are invited on that stage with me. I will not speak without them. I will not be celebrated for a story that belongs to us. Sincerely, Ms. Kate John. Mayfair Secondary School. Kitchen 1, back door. 3 days later, they wrote back. They said yes. The ceremony was held in a velvet-draped banquet hall in D.C., all crystal chandeliers and white linen napkins. The other finalists came from polished backgrounds, big degrees, long resumes, people used to standing behind podiums. But when our turn came, I walked up with my crew behind me. Malik, in a borrowed blazer. Amira, radiant in a dress she sewed herself. Justin, clutching his note cards like a lifeline. 2 more kids who once barely spoke in class, now shining like they were born to. I stood at the microphone, hands steady. They called me the lunch lady. They laughed. They looked past me for 12 years. But I wasn't waiting to be noticed, I was watching, listening, lifting. And I will not be the last. Then I stepped back and let the kids speak. They told their truths. Told the world how they were seen and saved, not by pity, but by presence. The room stood quiet for a beat too long. Then they rose to their feet. The plaque sits on a shelf in the clubroom now. Not in my house. Not on my mantle. Ours. Because every time I look at it, I remember. Recognition is nice. But revolution is better. They laughed at me. Then they clapped. But I never did this for applause. I did it because a hungry child once looked at me like I was the only solid ground in their life. And I vowed never to let them sink. It was a Thursday morning when he came back. I remember because the spaghetti was burning, and Carla was out sick, and I just told a group of 7th graders to stop sword fighting with baguettes. One of the security aides poked her head into the kitchen. Ms. Loretta, there's a man asking for you. Says he's a former student. Tall, suit and tie. Now, I've seen a lot of things in my time. But when I turned that corner and laid eyes on him, phew, my knees got weak like I hadn't eaten in a week. Because there stood Malik. Not the boy I remembered. Not the skinny kid with downcast eyes and second-hand shoes. But a grown man. Clean-shaven. Sharp jawline. Confidence radiating off him like heat. And when he saw me, he smiled that same quiet, aching smile I'd come to know like breath. Hey, Ms. Loretta. I didn't say anything. Just wrapped him in my arms like I'd birthed him myself. We sat on the old metal bench behind the cafeteria, the one where he used to hide after school. He brought 2 coffees and a bag of lemon scones. I heard about the award, he said, handing me the coffee. Saw the video. You let them know what time it is. I chuckled. Well, somebody had to. Then he pulled out a slim envelope and slid it into my lap. I looked at him sideways. What's this? Just something I wanted to give you before I forgot who I am. Inside was a commencement speech. Typed. Marked up in red pen. To be delivered at Princeton University's graduation ceremony, class of 2027. Malik had been chosen to speak. He was graduating top of his class. And he was using his voice. I didn't cry. Not at first. But when I read the last paragraph, I couldn't help it. There was a woman in a hairnet and sneakers who saw me when no one else did. She served more than lunch, she served survival. And now, every time I help someone believe in their worth, I'm just passing on the meal she gave me. My hands shook as I folded the pages back. Child, I whispered, you had that power in you the whole time. I know, he said. But you were the first one who acted like it. He stayed an hour. Toured the old clubroom, now filled with new faces, new dreams. He shook hands with Jameson. Hugged Amira, who was now an intern at a non-profit that teaches kids how to code. Left a stack of books for the mentorship shelf. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "You changed the trajectory of my life." I took his face in my hands and said, "No. You did that. I just stood beside you when you didn't think you could walk alone." Then I watched him leave. Tall. Sure. Whole. That night, I locked up the kitchen with a kind of peace I hadn't known before. Because we don't always get to see the fruits of our labor. But that day, I saw a whole orchard. They laughed at me. Called me the lunch lady. Called me invisible. But today, a man stood before me, built of brilliance and pain and poetry, and said, "I'm here because you saw me." And baby, that's worth more than any award on earth. I always said I'd leave on my own terms. Not when they told me to. Not when my knees gave out. Not even when the state finally remembered to upgrade our lunch trays. But when the time felt right. And one morning in early June, with sunlight pouring through the cafeteria windows and my apron strings tied just right, I knew. It was time. The clubroom was packed that day. 17 students, 5 mentors, and 2 teachers who used to roll their eyes at Loretta's after-school circle. They were listening to a 9th grade boy named Devon, small for his age, but fierce in voice. He stood beside the whiteboard with a marker in one hand and his truth in the other. They said I'd end up in juvie. Said I couldn't read at grade level. But Miss Loretta told me my story wasn't over. It was just starting on a page they didn't bother to turn. When he finished, the room exploded with applause. I just sat in the back. Quiet. Heart swelling like bread left to rise. That's when I knew, they didn't need me to run it anymore. They were it now. That evening, I wrote my resignation letter by hand. Simple. Steady. After 29 years of service in Mayfair's kitchen and community, I'm stepping away. But not out. I'll be around, planting gardens, hugging kids, and raising the kind of noise only an old black woman with a holy calling can raise. I signed it in blue ink. Folded it once. Left it on Principal Vaughant's desk with a slice of sweet potato pie. The school planned a retirement ceremony. Fancy invitations. Floral centerpieces. A slideshow with music that nearly had me sobbing in front of strangers. But the real goodbye happened a week later, in the clubroom, with nothing but folding chairs, fried chicken, and voices lifted in gratitude. Each student read a letter. Each mentor shared a memory. Jameson cried first. Carla followed right after. Then, Malik returned, again, this time with his degree in hand and a promise. "I'm taking over the Mentors Club, Ms. Loretta," he said. "You started it. But we'll keep it growing." I looked around the room. At the shelves lined with books. The wall covered in photos. The dry erase board scrawled with dreams. And I knew, I hadn't built a moment. I'd built a movement. That night, I sat on my porch, rocking gently as the crickets hummed and the streetlights blinked awake. I thought about the beginning, when they laughed at me. Called me slow. Called me background. Called me just the lunch lady. But I'd fed more than bellies. I'd fed futures. I'd fed hope. And now, they'd carry it forward. So, if you ever walk through Mayfair Secondary School, find that little annex room near the library. You'll see kids of every shape and color and sound, reading, speaking, believing. You'll see Malik at the front, calling on hands raised high. You'll see a picture on the wall, a woman in an apron, holding a tray in one hand and a journal in the other. And underneath it, a quote. They laughed at me, until they listened to me. And then, they followed me. Because love is louder than laughter. The end. Or maybe just the beginning.